Cheers.
Cheers.
Don Juan approximately. Don't think for a jiff I believe any of this. Alien diplomacy is just a hobby of mine. When Viking 2 did Mars in 1976, it sent back that famous photo the CIA overlooked. There in the red sand, a small face-shaped stone. My buddies at the We're Not Alone convention claimed some bumbler dropped its Easter Island amulet in the retreating scamper as the probe approached. Just the sort of rubes who give alien diplomacy a bad name. No wonder the quasi-wax predict human extinction in 2064. That's whenever it starts collecting coral. If you believe in quasi-wax, which is of course ridiculous. Their planet remains forever hidden in a perfect counter-orbit to the sun. It's totally like Earth. Quasi-wax, in fact, look a lot more human than most of the life forms waddling into Walmart. The funny part is how they know about us, but we don't them. See, the reverse polarity of Quasi-Wu's electromagnetic field altered their cerebral development in one dinky way. Quasi-Wax retain the future like we do the past. But any concept of memory is as lost to them as clairvoyance is on us. Oh, they know all about 2064, but can't remember what they had for lunch yesterday. They'll wait till only a handful of us are drowned. I'm thinking 2063. Then snatch us up as like holy seers of the impenetrable past. What a crock, huh? Anyway, nobody would expect it, but I've become quite the Mr. Athletic. I took up swimming and rock climbing a while back. Just for fun, of course. In my tank downstairs, I perfected a technique to tread water indefinitely. My record is a long weekend, not even bathroom breaks. My sister fed me. She won't go in, though. You know how girls are. Sally works for Virgin Atlantic, which is kind of, well, anyway, she does the London route. She even shares a flat there. Not that we're rich or anything. The insurance set us up okay. I turned Mom and Dad's room into my fix-it shop. My thing is bringing computers back to life. Sort of like a low-voltage Dr. Frankenstein.
Thank you.
My guys say I should open my own franchise, but I don't like headaches. This ties into a theory of mine. Pain kills brain cells. No one ever said getting dumber was supposed to feel good. Mr. Skirgle says higher life forms use migraines as civil discipline, that indigenous headaches are unique to defective species. Mr. Skirgle is also into alcohol. Our common walled neighbor is a relic from who knows when, retired from the university. One look at the hotshot handshakes framed around the vestibule, and you knew his wheel used to be big. But even back then, that hair. The brain waves fizzling off each and every thought turn people into what they are. Bankers go bald from guilt, pastors gray with worry, musicians never lose a strand, and a scientist can stick straight out as if in want of signals from the beyond. Mr. Skirgle had his Van de Graaff generator look down, or maybe up. He combs salad oil in it now. Turns out he was scaring babies at the grocery store. This I considered a misstep. It doesn't feel right to be cornered in the dairy aisle by a chummy old geese reeking of garlic and herb. It's not his fault. Decrepitation must be a tough gig. Every stripe of human personality and old age reduces it to one of two flavors. Grumpy, goofy. Nothing else. Mr. Skirgle managed the latter, which in the rigged game of aging qualifies as a triumph. Still, his old man permafrown had come in real nice. Think constipated turtle. The professor was so thin his belt was eating itself. All I ever saw him eat was booze, which won't fit easily into the 5 food groups. He's older than electricity, and all he talks about is the collection. 200-odd bottles, rare stuff the world over, finest labels. Secret of his longevity, he'd say. For every ache, there was a tablespoon of this, a quarter shot of that. Remedies based on an endless catalog of cures he'd spun up over a century of knocking one back. It left his voice a bit tattered. Listening to him was something close to a disposal full of chicken bones.
You've picked a era to grow up in, lad. Everyone's being emasculated these days, even the women.
He would make those noises old men sub for adjectives. Fuddy-dud translation books would be bestsellers, if not for most of the language-defying known alphabets. Mr. Skirgle, he was a committed bachelor.
However, the restorative powers of certain carefully prescribed spirits has been suspiciously underreported by the Blorb establishment.
He lived cheap as a dime except for the bottles. Sally and I figured it was one of those fixed-income purgatories that suck in the oldsters. What did we know? Friday night found me tanked. It was winter and I recently disconnected the heating element to better simulate oceanic temperatures. This went okay except for the sleeper float. I didn't like how my veins turned blue. Nevertheless, there I was in my basement, floating naked over Nepal, listening to my sister upstairs making time with some jolly good chap she met on the flight. I'm not the type who can take the ineffable and make it F, if you know what I mean. But it can get real private floating in a cold tank. An ancient Nordic myth says Old Man Winter retreats from the onset of spring with his ice vixen. The Blizzard King guides his sleigh north across last remnants of snow, racing for the safety of his glacial palace. The warmth becomes oppressive. They may not make it. The once frigid temptress grows moist. In the madness of her heat, wild inspiration strikes. She opens her silvery lips. She goes for his icicle. It glistens with frost, and the old king stirs as snow clouds gather in his cold, stony scrotum. The ice vixen keeps chillin' until he howls the horrible north wind. It blows and blows, and a wintry white storm flies out everywhere, all over beast and child. I sighed. My veins were blue. The tank had for the evening lost its appeal. I climbed out, dripping guilty patterns on the faceless gray concrete. Something upstairs fell over, and Sally howled. Personally, I shun the madness. Once I tried explaining how many brain cells it kills. Sally laughed and said, "Who needs them?" She's what some might call a right comely lass. Not that I don't like girls or anything. It's just how everybody gets so opinionated about trivial stuff, as if agreeing on anything were boring. I don't like debates, conflict. So you stop bothering, and one day you're 23 and never learned the social graces, and the only ones who still call are other dweebs who only reinforce what you already don't like about yourself, and the scary part comes that morning you stand in the mirror and there's no more denying it. You radiate geek. It's gotten to your blood. No new hair, no new clothes, new muscles, or even contacts can hide the infection. I do confess that is one bummer of a day. It can in time be accepted. Life goes on and all that. It doesn't mean there weren't some Friday nights that just sat there pointing a finger at me. This was that. I toweled off, staring at the wall that guillotines our house into a duplex. I'd never been in Mr. Skirgle's basement, never been all that far beyond the paperboy collection point in the front hall. To be honest, the professor always liked me more than I deserved. Called me a misunderstood genius. Guess he had a knack for knowing where you need it most. Unfortunately, he was also weird, weirder than I was lonely, except maybe tonight. I hardly ever bothered with him. If this reflects poorly on me, it is not undeserved. Even the most basic social skills can rust over. Standing in the huffy night before his door, waiting out the measured pause between bell and footsteps, I felt a cowering loyalty for the old guy. He'd been a constant all those years adolescence kept changing me, usually for the worse. Mr. Skirgle's not so bad. It's just hard going in for anyone old when the only thing you've got in your favor is youth. I rubbed at the cold. The Quasi-Wax say Earth will eventually make the map as a scenic turnout on the Milky Highway. Rumor has it, certain factions can't wait for 2064 to roll around so they can turn the whole planet into a humongous water park. Right. He opened his front door and that smell, that Skirgle smell, reached out for me with its spindly arms. Parts dead air, Vicks Vapo Rub, garlic and herb, and alcohol potpourri. Remarkably effective at jogging recollection why hanging with the fogey was easier put off.
Fortuitous timing, son.
Mr. Skirgle had reached that age where his skull looked ready to hatch from his face. For such men, smiles do not convey what they intend. He clasped my whole forearm like I was Mr. President.
Get thyself in from the cold.
Yeah, he'd say that stuff. It was one of those way back whens, everybody talking in like Bible verses or something. Ever notice how genius goes funny after a while? Not crazy, not even senile. Just, well, more interested in what's them than what works. Given time, it can turn a man into whatever is the opposite of cool. For a 3-digit bachelor, genius ain't necessarily some great thing. Mr. Skirgle liked his privacy. The aluminum foil shades left little doubt. 20 years had them something short of silver, and I don't know which home improvement book said to rig up a toilet in his living room, but there it was, centering the floor as if he possessed unique gifts. Genius. Let's not forget the collection, i.e. booze room. The walls were fitted with antique cabinets, glass doors, glass shelves, mirrored backing. Meticulously arranged within were the bottles, polished and sparkling like jewelry. His recipe book was the kicker, done up like a relic on its own special altar. The front door barely latched before pages were being flipped as if he wrote every one, which of course he had. This thing is fatter than God's big book of sin, and the professor found what he wanted in 2 turns.
What do you find of death, lad?
Death? He turned around with a pair of Holy Grail shot glasses.
I never paid it much mind either.
He cleared his throat. His gizzard rattled on a moment, sounding like that rusty grass cutter he'd push around the front yard.
Life. Now that's always been a real bugger.
He removed a genie bottle filled with what looked like jet fuel. Words on the label were in some illegible eye chart language.
Comes from a girl in the Sumatran jungles.
He filled each glass. Either the hermit expected company or my fortuitous timing was lousy. Everybody knows booze kills more brain cells than migraines, sex, and disco combined. Mr. Skirgle doddered up close. He lowered his voice.
Worry not, dear lad, for this is no vapid inebriant. Even the Sultan of Brunei only uncorks the stuff for the most respected of guests.
What's the proof? I was handed a shot.
108, but potency can't be measured.
I took a sniff and wheezed. Alcohol always leaps down your nose before you're ready, like it can hardly wait to get in there and start messing things up. Mr. Skirgle gave me this look that said about 10 things at once. At times he could invite troubling speculations. He raised his glass.
Once more, unto the breach.
A toast from the 23 Skidoo School. Zis boom ba, said I, saluting the weird old days. Okay, what's an ounce of liquor? A couple tablespoons of low-grade toxin never killed anyone. I mean, I've done alcohol before, even Southern Comfort once, and that's 100 proof. I knew about shots. It's really hot at first, right? Then kind of shreds around your belly. Not this concoction. It went down warm, painless even. When it hit my stomach, I got those vacations a-comin' butterflies. Talk about cool. Whoa. Mr. Skirgle did that smile you could sign up for Halloween. Brushing for him was an issue. Really, though, at this stage, his teeth were more in line for a good combing.
Bad, eh?
Something changed. Whatever is me seeped out an inch or so beyond my skin. I looked up and Mr. Skirgle is trying to knock me into his bottomless pit stare. Eyes in that moment were naked as bodies, shameless right in front of us. Not just eyes, everything. The world looked naked, recombobulated, like a dingy film of dumb stuff was wiped from my optic nerve and things never seen were nearly visible. I blinked.
Son, come have a seat in the entertainment room.
I did not want, in a room centered by a toilet, to imagine what entertainment might be. He promptly assumed the throne, I the couch, and we sat a while. Most silence really sucks, like it's screaming all the things you don't know how to say. Not this. Then Mr. Skirgle asked if I ever heard of Macro Man. Who's he with, Marvel or DC? He rubbed the flaps of his face.
I only say this because my blurb of assumption is at hand. He'll need a new synergizer, you see, and dear lad, you are the one for the job.
If you want to get deep, I suppose we all kind of want some big something to come along and fill our lives with meaning. When you're doomed to nothing in particular, any sort of chosen one stuff can sound pretty cool. Not that I'm any Greek philosopher. Everybody knows about them and their fun. So me part A got into his I am the one thing. Me part B wonders, what's this codger onto now? Macro Man? An assumption, that means dying, right? I hate when old folks talk about dying. They always lord it over you like some lousy job they got stuck with. Synergist? I deferred. Is that one of those door-to-door vitamin guy things?
Tell me,
The professor asked with new enthusiasm.
do you know how an elevator uses a counterweight?
He sounded so serious, perched there on his special can. I nodded. Counterweight. Yeah, sure. Our secret.
That is what you shall be for him.
One of those indecipherable old man twinkles came to his eye.
Only he doesn't get up and down.
The Fuds had obviously twitched a lobe. Mr. Skirgle, I stopped delivering the Daily Hawker 5 years ago. Now the indecipherable old man smiled. No wonder these people are quarantined. They don't play by the rules.
You've heard of the space-time continuum. Well, Einstein was on the right track. He did overlook one very big factor in cosmic ecology.
I checked my watch. I'm sure he did. Geezer eyes pried into me.
Best I explain. From the beginning.
Slowly that smile, like watching paint peel.
But,
And he stood. Seeing a centurion rise is sort of like waiting for the Hindenburg to land.
another parley with the collection made matters,
he announced flamboyantly. Mr. Skirgle wobbled into the pharmacy. He came back clutching the genie bottle in one knobby hand, shot glasses in the other. He poured as only a scientist can, as if his life depended on every drop. When he started into that onto the beach stuff, I downed mine. It sent the first dose slithering squirmy into my veins. I had to re-look. What followed was, in sheer mass, enough bull dinky to rival a cattle ranch. He kept me going till dawn. In 1943, the Manhattan Project was a full steam ahead secret. Skirgle was one of the lucky ones not sequestered away to that pitiful patch of desert. The feds paid him $327 a week to work with a top guy whose name he would not say. Then blammo, the bigwig gets pegged by a car. Mr. Skirgle sees it. He runs up. He crouches over. The poor guy is bleeding his heart out. Then he whispers numbers in Skirgle's ear, just like some cheesy movie. On cue, he wilts, in his assistant's arms, in the middle of the street, dead. Incurably so. It's not me making this up. Late that night, Mr. Skirgle is back at the lab, dialing them this way and that on his boss's safe. After an hour of this, it clicks. The heavy little door silently yawns open. All he finds inside is a metal spaghetti strainer. He does quickly deduce this particular brand has the unique ability to glow dull green whenever touched. Suspecting he's onto something even the latest Sears catalog has overlooked, Skirgle stuffs the kitchen accessory in a mail bag. He hightails it out of town, Orson Welles in his head uttering eloquent panic. Privacy. He'd need God-forsaken privacy for this one. And off he drove to some university plot out in Palookaville. It's that darkest hour short of dawn. He stands in an empty barn. It creaks in the wind and you can't see a thing except by the creepy glow of this gizmo in his hands. I think Mr. Skirgle is trying to make my palms sweat. Maybe it's that leap of genius separating scientists from us mere mortals. Somehow he decides to put the thing on his noggin. Considering his fashion sense, I found this the most credible turn yet.
Grrr, sooner do. Then a voice says, "Who are you?" I spin around. A fella stands there plain as Abe, wondering what I am, right down to the colander on his head. Naturally, I said, "Who are you?"
I, he proclaimed, am Macro Man. How did you get my synergizer? The guy spoke with the vague irritation of one whose every word must first be translated into knucklehead. Skirgle, dumbstruck as he was, managed to hash out the sad tragedy. But his scientific curiosity was boiling over the beaker. Something here had definitely gone amiss.
What do you mean, Macroman? This is university property, and you, sir, are trespassing.
We have no time for superfluous query. There is much about you I must ascertain. Mr. Skirgle had yet to grasp the otherworldliness of the situation. His ire was up.
Oh, really?
He rejoined.
And why exactly is that?
The longer I stay here with you now, the more the universe becomes lopsided. Lopsided. Skirgle's face went blank as he chased after it. Your feeble brain cannot grasp the potential consequence of this imbalance. About here, the man seemed to realize such indignities would not further his own urgent ends. He looked Skirgle hard in the eye and spoke with rapid precision. The most vital role of your colleague's life was wholly unknown. In the Earth year 1919, I gave him the device now on your head. The synergizer allows me to travel from the galaxy's better half to this vile little stone. None of my competitors are clever enough to replicate its design, which has left me a sort of intergalactic Marco Polo. Its operating principle, simplistically speaking, allows the two users to exchange location in the space-time ecstasy triaxis. I come here, you go to Geeg.
Geeg,
Mr. Skirgle retorted. Geeg is my native planet, approximately 80,000 light years, and he pointed that way.
native planet.
I am altering my appearance to accommodate the skittish nature of your race. Macroman ambled across the old floorboards, straw crunching under his heels. My being here now, without reciprocal alignment to maintain the parallax between us, is fraught with perils. I risk modulating the entire universe. If we were, for example, to touch, and he paused weightily, the destruction would be unfathomable, even for me. Yet I had no choice. Your ecstasy quotient was insufferably low. I knew an upstart had seized my instrument.
Upstart.
Like many scientists, Mr. Skirgle's people skills often belied the genius hunkered in his brain. He was beside himself. His interjections had ceased to effectively manage the path of discourse. Now he was wary of being coerced into an arrangement he might live to regret, like that recent fiasco with the bath brush salesman. The busybody pointed at Skirgle's new chapeau. One of the Synergizer's many auxiliary functions provides full diagnosis of your mental and emotional sentience. The recipient of this news was stumped. Mr. Skirgle, you are a joyless man. The broadside struck home. Just last year, his dying mother lamented raising a killjoy. She always got the final word, expiring in this case with the observation still on her lips. It lent certain heft to the claim. Killjoy. To prove her wrong, Skirgle explored a variety of counter-initiatives. He even rented a lady one evening until she got offended by his atheism and left. Now, up and out of the blue, this interloper labels him joyless. The irony wormed in. Mother, as usual, had been correct. He was a rather stoic sort, a fine theorist, but all that achievement faded in the shadow of her lament. He only noticed silence in the barn when it ended. The know-it-all was not done. Among humans, it is you physicists who are famous for denying joy's key role in overcoming the laws of inertia. Before I discovered Earth, we took for granted any intelligent life understood an absence of rapture causes matter to entropy. Your silly space-time theory completely ignores this stabilizing influence. It's as if you designed a two-legged stool. Back on Geek, the late-night talk show hosts are having a field day. Right around here, Mr. Skirtle decided he didn't like this guy, wherever he was from. Which is to say, I am not at all surprised by your primitive demeanor. Your predecessor was much the same way, until I serviced his philosophies. The professor felt a tremble in his limbs. Serviced? Sir, you shall know ecstasy. Mr. Skirtle gulped. The man sensed his panic. He came closer, two glowing strainers, just a ruined universe apart. During your remaining 56 years, you will experience periods of sustained bliss far beyond the fleeting joy your species calls orgasm. Instinctively, Skirtle blushed. His brain barged back in.
Wait, you're saying I'm going to die in...
Didn't mean to spoil the surprise, the alien conceded. On Geek, you'd have found out soon enough. Death, according to hallowed scientific canon, was the ultimate yikes, where all forms of logic, empiricism, and autognosis went in the crapper. It was the professor's least favorite subject.
But wait, what? Why?
He grilled. Why? Macroman replied. Well, I suppose I owe you that much. Earth has three important qualities. Location, and the point is, it lies deep within a portion of the galaxy, seething with low-level vibrations. This dark matter, as your astronomers call it, renders a full third of your DNA into useless junk, radically reducing your ability to experience elation. These parsecs were believed so toxic, we simply called them the frying pan, a loose translation. They were assumed uninhabitable, as the pain of a joyless existence would surely drive any self-respecting life form to annihilate itself. The being sighed. If only you knew how I loathe loitering on this bleak pebble. But as our old saying goes, business before bliss. It brought a strange smile. When Earth was discovered, our hyperlight viewing devices could only verify your continued survival by measuring an increase of smog in your atmosphere. In our better neck of the woods, theories on you little blue men were all the rage. That settled it. I had to know. Never did I imagine the windfall my synergizers would provide. You see, I did find one saving grace of your civilization, without which humanity would have long ago self-destructed. Self-destructed? The alien had a talent for corralling one's confusion. Where I come from, money does in fact buy happiness, Mr. Skirtle, and I am one very cheery fellow. When clients wore a splash of my cologne, essence of ecstasy, they experienced a stylish and trendy enlightenment. EE was in fact all the rage. Alas, no novelty stays fresh forever. When sales lagged, I needed a better booth to keep ahead of the trollops stealing my market share. Imagine the surprise when I found that missing ingredient in the hormone released during the sexual climax of the human female. My new fragrance, Little Blue Woman, is la sensation du siècle, as your perfumers say. He flexed his grin. Some smiles are capable of instilling only dread. I commute here to collect this concoction from as many women as inhumanly possible. A tedious task, this seduction business, though they do enjoy basking in the feverish fires of my glow. Skrugel reached saturation. He stared at the man's glowing hat and wiggled his tongue obsessively against the back of his teeth, a long-standing nervous habit. You shall be my counterweight, Macro Man announced, traveling to Geeg whenever I come here. The tongue strummed with absent pleasure, a quirk that first surfaced when his schoolyard chums made him lick the battery terminal on that horseless carriage. It would later encourage his vocabulary to adopt auxiliary sounds. I've dallied long enough, the alien concluded. Tell no one, or certain doom awaits not only you, but your species, perhaps even your planet as well. I do have my moods. Cold blew in, creaking the barn's old boards. You may remove my synergizer, Mr. Skrugel. I only advise that when you return it to your head, be prepared for the ride of your life.
Then he his hands to the dingus, and it went bright. Presto! Macro Man vanished.
What'd you do? I asked. Just humoring, of course. Scared. He was scared. Got the hell out of there. Hid the gizmo in the trunk of his Studebaker and made for town. Soon enough, Mr. Skruggel's apprehension was back on the ball. Macro Man. What a howler. Clearly the Nimwit was a subject in one of those LSD trials the army was conducting under everyone's nose. He laughed the last 17 miles home, pausing only to flash the state trooper his federal ID. Seems he'd been pushing a new land speed record. Skrugel reached his apartment. He dragged a chair to the window and stared out at the void of light that was Lake Michigan. As dawn pulled its haunches, the water went from blue to gold to white to blue. It was 7 a.m. He was due in the lab by 8. His boss was no more. How do you properly grasp that with this alien hoo-ha elbowing through your head? He marched into the kitchen. He ignored the bath brushes he hadn't unwrapped. He opened the oven and got out the gall darn doohickey. It went radiant in his hands. Mr. Skrugel held his breath, hoping this alone might puff his courage. Once more unto the breach, he whispered, and put it on his head.
Son, what I saw next, words ain't invented for.
The regular ones are fine. I was trying to be nice.
Well, let me hear. Our forniculture can't lay a fiddle on what sex is over there.
Sex? I always looked up to him as a sort of father of abstinence. Or frustration, maybe.
Making whoopee over there? Chimney Christmas! Fries every brain cell in one giant poof. Complete lobotomy. That's why they take a photo of your mind before any hanky-panky, so they can put your brains back in your head when you're done.
What does one do upon hearing that, short of run for the door? The man's age requires an extra digit. He's got that old man don't interrupt him thing going. It's late. There's a subtropical intoxicant fondling my better judgment. Short of excuse myself and sneak out the back door, I was stuck.
I can see it would behoove me,
And he started for the kitchen.
to substantiate these outlandish claims.
I found myself following. You don't really have to, Mr. Skirgle. We entered the old man's kitchen, and it was immediately weird. Scattered across the table were wedges of browning apples and a cheese that smelled disarmingly of feet. He opened the door to the alien depths of his basement. A puff of tomb dust vanished down rickety stairs.
Light switch at the bottom.
The man helped split the atom, but he can't wire his dungeon into the 20th century? Why would I follow him down, practically piggyback a step behind? The Sultan of Brunei in my belly made the shadows squirm with late show stuff. Pretty embarrassing, actually. I'm a little old for the dark to be scaring the daylights out of me.
By now, human technology would have... I'm about to show you.
He oozed down one step at a time.
It's those damn politicos, hornswoggling NASA.
The old duffer would say things like that. Hornswoggle. So I guess he's a bird watcher, too.
It's like I always said, Congress is the opposite of progress.
Even in the dark, his basement had no symmetry with ours, as if the guillotine slab had subdivided a portal of Twilight Zone. It might be some bone-built catacomb or hyperspace command module, I don't know. When he finally pulled the bulb string, it topped all that. Doors. Nothing but closed doors. 4 of them. A lot easier to believe I was being suckered into a starring appearance on the 11 o'clock news. He put a key in door number 2.
It's December, lad. December 1999. Do you know what that means? 20th Century Fox needs a new name? Tarnation, boy! It means I'm here to die!
Sadness filled the lines of his face. Quickly it drained to resignation.
I'm not afraid. I'm ready as a man can be. It's just this waiting.
He turned the bolt.
341 days I've been at it. Always on the lookout. Always game. It's a strange thing to know the end is nigh.
He unlocked the door and led me in. I crossed into shadow, feeling for a switch. Mr. Skirgle closed the door behind us, side by side in the dark.
Well, lad, you're committed.